My Dream by Leo Tolstoy. As a daughter, she no longer exists for me. Can't you understand? She simply doesn't exist. Still, I cannot possibly leave her to the charity of strangers. I will arrange things so that she can live as she pleases, but I do not wish to hear of her. Who would ever have thought? The horror of it. The horror of it. He shrugged his shoulders, shook his head, and raised his eyes. These words were spoken by Prince Michael Ivanovich to his brother Peter, who was governor of a province in central Russia. Prince Peter was a man of 50, Michael's junior by 10 years. On discovering that his daughter, who had left his house a year before, had settled here with her child, the elder brother had come from St. Petersburg to the provincial town where the above conversation took place. Prince Michael Ivanovich was a tall, handsome, white-haired, fresh-coloured man, proud and attractive in appearance and bearing. His family consisted of a vulgar, irritable wife who wrangled with him continually over every petty detail, a son, a ne'er-do-well, spendthrift, and roué, yet a gentleman according to his father's code. 2 daughters, of whom the elder had married well and was living in St. Petersburg, and the younger, Lisa, his favourite, who had disappeared from home a year before. Only a short while ago he had found her with her child in this provincial town. Prince Peter wanted to ask his brother how and under what circumstances Lisa had left home, and who could possibly be the father of her child, but he could not make up his mind to inquire. That very morning, when his wife had attempted to condole with her brother-in-law, Prince Peter had observed a look of pain on his brother's face. The look had at once been masked by an expression of unapproachable pride, and he had begun to question her about their flat and the price she paid. At luncheon, before the family and guests, he had been witty and sarcastic as usual. Towards everyone excepting the children, whom he treated with almost reverent tenderness, he adopted an attitude of distant hauteur. And yet it was so natural to him that everyone somehow acknowledged his right to be haughty. In the evening his brother arranged a game of whist. When he retired to the room which had been made ready for him, and was just beginning to take out his artificial teeth, someone tapped lightly on the door with 2 fingers. "Who is that?" "C'est moi, Michael." Prince Michael Ivanovich recognized the voice of his sister-in-law, frowned, replaced his teeth, and said to himself, "What does she want?" Aloud he said, "Entrez." His sister-in-law was a quiet, gentle creature, who bowed in submission to her husband's will, but to many she seemed a crank, and some did not hesitate to call her a fool. She was pretty, but her hair was always carelessly dressed, and she herself was untidy and absent-minded. She had also the strangest, most unaristocratic ideas, by no means fitting in the wife of a high official. These ideas she would express most unexpectedly, to everyone's astonishment, her husband's no less than her friends. "Vous pouvez me voir Mais je ne m'arrêterai pas. Je vous le dis d'avance, she began, in her characteristic, indifferent way. Dieu préserve, answered her brother-in-law, with his usual somewhat exaggerated politeness, and brought forward a chair to her. Ça ne vous dérange pas? She asked, taking out a cigarette. I'm not going to say anything unpleasant, Michael. I only wanted to say something about Lizochka. Michael Ivanovich sighed. The word pained him, but mastering himself at once, he answered with a tired smile. Our conversation can only be on one subject, and that is the subject you wish to discuss. He spoke without looking at her, and avoided even naming the subject. But his plump, pretty little sister-in-law was unabashed. She continued to regard him with the same gentle, imploring look in her blue eyes, sighing even more deeply. Michael, mon bon ami, have pity on her. She is only human. I never doubted that, said Michael Ivanovich with a bitter smile. She is your daughter. She was. But, my dear Aline, why talk about this? Michael, dear, won't you see her? I only wanted to say that the one who is to blame, Prince Michael Ivanovich flushed. His face became cruel. For heaven's sake, let us stop. I have suffered enough. I have now but one desire, and that is to put her in such a position that she will be independent of others, that she shall have no further need of communicating with me. Then she can live her own life, and my family and I need know nothing more about her. That is all I can do. Michael, you say nothing but I. She too is I. No doubt, but dear Aline, please let us drop the matter. I feel it too deeply. Alexandra Dmitrievna remained silent for a few moments, shaking her head. And Masha, your wife thinks as you do? Yes, quite. Alexandra Dmitrievna made an inarticulate sound. Brisons. La Jésus est bonne nuit, said he, but she did not go. She stood silent for a moment. Then, Peter tells me you intend to leave the money with the woman where she lives. Have you the address? I have. Don't leave it with the woman, Michael. Go yourself. Just see how she lives. If you don't want to see her, you need not. He isn't there. There is no one there. Michael Ivanovich shuddered violently. Why do you torture me so? It's a sin against hospitality. Alexandra Dmitrievna rose, and almost in tears, being touched by her own pleading, said, She is so miserable, but she is such a dear. He got up and stood, waiting for her to finish. She held out her hand. Michael, you do wrong, said she, and left him. For a long while after she had gone, Michael Ivanovich walked to and fro on the square of the carpet. He frowned and shivered and exclaimed, Oh, oh, and then the sound of his own voice frightened him, and he was silent. His wounded pride tortured him. His daughter, brought up in the house of her mother, the famous Avdotia Borisovna, whom the Empress honoured with her visits, an acquaintance with whom was an honour for all the world. His daughter, and he had lived his life as a knight of old, knowing neither fear nor blame. The fact that he had a natural son, born of a Frenchwoman, whom he had settled abroad, did not lower his own self-esteem. And now his daughter, for whom he had not only done everything that a father could and should do, this daughter to whom he had given splendid education and every opportunity to make a match in the best Russian society. This daughter to whom he had not only given all that a girl could desire, but whom he had really loved, whom he admired, been proud of, this daughter had repaid him with such disgrace that he was ashamed and could not face the eyes of men. He recalled the time when she was not merely his child and a member of his family, but his darling, his joy and pride. He saw her again, a little thing of 8 or 9, bright, intelligent, lively, impetuous, graceful, with brilliant black eyes and flowing auburn hair. He remembered how she used to jump up on his knees and hug him and tickle his neck, and how she would laugh regardless of his protests, and continue to tickle him and kiss his lips, his eyes, and his cheeks. He was naturally opposed to all demonstration, but this impetuous love moved him, and he often submitted to her petting. He remembered also how sweet it was to caress her. To remember all this when that sweet child had become what she was now, a creature of whom he could not think without loathing. He also recalled the time when she was growing into womanhood, and the curious feeling of fear and anger that he experienced when he became aware that men regarded her as a woman. He thought of his jealous love when she came coquettishly to him, dressed for a ball, and knowing that she was pretty. He dreaded the passionate glances which fell upon her, that she not only did not understand, but rejoiced in. Yes, thought he, that superstition of woman's purity, quite the contrary. They do not know shame. They lack this sense. He remembered how, quite inexplicably, to him, she had refused two very good suitors. She had become more and more fascinated by her own success in the round of gaieties she lived in. But this success could not last long. A year passed, then 2, then 3. She was a familiar figure, beautiful, but her first youth had passed, and she had become somehow part of the ballroom furniture. Michael Ivanovich remembered how he had realized that she was on the road to spinsterhood, and desired but one thing for her. He must get her married off as quickly as possible. Perhaps not quite so well as might have been arranged earlier, but still a respectable match. But it seemed to him she had behaved with a pride that bordered on insolence. Remembering this, his anger rose more and more fiercely against her. To think of her refusing so many decent men, only to end in this disgrace. Oh, he groaned again. Then stopping, he lit a cigarette and tried to think of other things. He would send her money without ever letting her see him, but memories came again. He remembered it was not so very long ago, for she was more than 20 then, her beginning a flirtation with a boy of 14, a cadet of the Corps of Pages, who had been staying with them in the country. She had driven the boy half crazy. He had wept in his distraction. Then how she had rebuked her father severely, coldly, even rudely. When, to put an end to this stupid affair, he had sent the boy away. She seemed somehow to consider herself insulted. Since then, father and daughter had drifted into undisguised hostility. I was right, he said to himself. She is a wicked and shameless woman. And then, as a last ghastly memory, there was the letter from Moscow, in which she wrote that she could not return home, that she was a miserable abandoned woman, asking only to be forgiven and forgotten. Then the horrid recollection of the scene with his wife came to him. Their surmises and their suspicions, which became a certainty. The calamity had happened in Finland, where they had let her visit her aunt, and the culprit was an insignificant Swede, a student, an empty-headed, worthless creature, unmarried. All this came back to him now as he paced backwards and forwards on the bedroom carpet, recollecting his former love for her, his pride in her. He recoiled with terror before the incomprehensible fact of her downfall, and he hated her for the agony she was causing him. He remembered the conversation with his sister-in-law and tried to imagine how he might forgive her. But as soon as the thought of him arose, there surged up in his heart horror, disgust, and wounded pride. He groaned aloud and tried to think of something else. No, it is impossible. I will hand over the money to Peter to give her monthly. And as for me, I have no longer a daughter. And again, a curious feeling overpowered him, a mixture of self-pity at the recollection of her love for her and a fury against her for causing him this anguish.